Today we're talking about drums, specifically why yours don't hit as hard as the pros, and why it has actually nothing to do with things like EQ or compression. You see, after 15 years of producing and faithfully recreating dozens of beatport hits, I discovered that 80% of your drum quality comes from one simple habit: how often you're A-Bing your mix. Now, if you want your drums to sound instantly club ready, you need to stop mixing in isolation and start mixing with context. And there's a specific workflow that the pros use to get powerful, punchy drums in minutes without the guesswork. And that's exactly what I'll reveal to you in this video today. And to make all of this even easier, I've put together a free Song Finishing Toolkit with checklists, samples, racks, and more for you to grab in the description. But to get started here today, we'll be looking at a professional project file based on one of Fisher's many Beatport #1 songs. To follow along at your own pace or dive deep into the details, you can download this video's project files as well as over 30 full project files inspired by Beatport Top 100 songs, with new files being added weekly. Just visit the link on screen now or in the description. All right. So when it comes to the drums for this one, as usual, first thing is make sure you have a reference track in your project file here. So we have Fisher and Jennifer Lopez's tune Waiting for Tonight up in here. It's turned off and I've set it up so when I press the S key, I can flick back and forth between what we're working on and the actual tune. So we can select the right samples, make sure the notes are hitting correctly, and set the right volumes. That's kind of be the trick there. So what I did for this one is the kind of standard kick trick that I've been doing for the last little while. So the nice thing is when you get a tune that has the extended mix, what you want to do is find an area in the tune where like just the drums are playing. So over back in here, we have the drum outro right here. And so what I did is I have a couple slices here. So I found this little slice right here. And then what I did was I consolidated it with Command J or Control J. So it's just one sample. And then once you do something like this, what you can do is right click it and then press show in browser. And it'll show the clip there. And when you press this little show similar sound button, it's going to show you all the kick sounds that are similar to this original kick sound. So you can then have something similar that sounds something similar to the original tune, but it's one of your own samples. It's a high quality sample. So it's a nice way to kind of steal the kick from a track without having to actually like steal it from the kick and have like maybe the hi-hats coming through it and all that kind of stuff. So with doing this trick, I ended up with two kick sounds that I liked, both from Rocket Powered Sound. So I have one that is kind of doing more of the high end, if you have a listen here. Very subtle. And another that's doing like, it's the main kick really. So just added two because I felt like adding two. I felt like it worked. A good thing to do is when you're building out your drums, build them out actually over like say over here. So if we bring the loop over here, now we can flick back and forth and try to get ours to sound similar in sound and volume to the track that's in the reference. So I feel like ours could sound a little thicker. So something that I might do here is I have this drum bus and I can increase the boom amount. Something like that. So other than that, let's have a quick look at the pattern. So it's just the 4 on the floor. I have it on 2 because I have 2 samples playing. Other than that, what we're doing is I've removed a bunch of the highs on that higher end kind of clicky bit of the kick at around whatever this would be, 900 hertz or so. And then this other one is just playing fully. Other than that, we're running into the standard kind of like little channel strip that I run into. So we have a transient designer here. We're pulling back the sustain a bit to tighten up the kick a little bit. And what this is the free kilohertz transient shaper. I've just mapped the core like knobs to an Ableton rack just to make it simpler and easier to use. But then I've been really loving using drum bus in the last little bit, particularly because you can add in this boom function. And then you can set it to the key of the song if you'd like. Or like have it playing a note that's in the scale, which is also a good idea. Sometimes it's not the best if it's playing the exact same note as say the bass is playing. There could be like kind of frequency overlap and that kind of stuff that makes it sound like crap. But like for example, off and on, off and on, adds a lot of like fullness and body. There's probably a little volume there. So again, when you're going through the internet looking at like YouTube tutorials, if someone shows you something and like it's like, oh, look at this cool new plugin and the volume is louder when they turn it on, volume loudness is going to be that thing that's going to actually be making you think that it sounds better. So be careful with that. Other than that, that's a good look at the kick. And the main thing is to flick back and forth, trying to get the volumes correct. With that similar sound search feature that we showed here, it's pretty easy to get a similar sound. And then it's all about the volume. Flicking back and forth in context, almost in time. So you can almost hear your kick as if it was in like part of that tune. The next element that I added was this open hat. So let's have a look and listen to that. And let's have a listen to the reference. This has an open hat. So let's actually listen to this. Flicking back and forth, I feel like I actually picked almost the same, which is kind of cool. It sounds so similar. And one of the ways that I was able to do that was similar to the kick trick. I went in over here and found an isolated part of where the open hi-hat's playing by itself. Consolidated it, did the show in browser trick, then clicked the show similar sounds, and then went through these and ended up finding something that sounded similar. So let's have a look at what I ended up with right over here. Let's bring that open hat loud back here. So what I ended up with is a layer of 3 samples. So one is this sound here, which is a big part of it. It's kind of the main element of it. Then we have this sound here, which is very slight addition to it. And then this, I actually brought in the actual sample into my DAW here. So this is from the actual song. And I just have this little bracket that I made here where I'm able to quickly adjust the filter frequency, adjust the filter to envelope frequency, which helps to kind of isolate the sound a little bit more, particularly when you're extracting the kick, which is kind of nice. But everything's just all in one area here. Quickly adjust some knobs and kind of isolate the sound altogether. It sounds like this. Main core sounds this. Tightened up the end of the loop so that it's getting more of a tighter sound. If you listen to the reference, it's fairly tight sound. And I believe I did that for almost all of them. This one I just adjusted the release or the decay, and then on this one, nothing too much going on there. But this was a layer of 3 different sounds. Also on this, there's this part here. Let's have a look. Where I've just removed that louder, more full open hat sound, and this is more of an arrangement trick. There's parts of the song where the open hi-hat isn't as loud and proud playing through, basically, and that's what this part's here for. Other than that, running into the standard channel strip that I run into, which is usually EQ, transient shaping, sidechain, and saturation. So have a look. So first thing is removing a bunch of the lows here. Kind of standard thing that I usually do on almost every single track other than the kick and the bass, so that it makes room for the kick and the bass. So removing everything under 300 hertz, ducking a little bit at 800. I guess I thought it sounded like shit or something like that, so remove something there. I don't usually do surgical EQ, to be honest. It's more about just finding the right sample and moving on. Then we're running into that transient shaper again, tightening up the sustain once again to get that tighter, nicer sound. With drums, I feel like controlling the sustain is a pretty important, awesome thing to be focusing on. Then we're running into this saturation. So this is just Ableton Saturator. That wasn't what I wanted to click. It's just Ableton Saturator here. Again, just with the main knob not mapped here so that I'm not getting, confused by the user interface and admiring it and then not actually making any moves. This way, you just quickly make your move and move on while you're making your track. And adding a little bit of width with this one knob wider plugin from Polyverse, which is pretty freaking sweet. And just again, it's a free plugin, just mapped all the knobs to an Ableton rack to make things quick and easy and ready to go. Other than that, the next thing that I moved on to was the closed hi-hat. So let's have a look and listen to that. Let's have a look at the MIDI as well. And for this, flicking back, you can hear it, they're it's kind of shuffling. It's a cool little groove that's added there with, I believe it's a shaker and a hat. So I tried to emulate it with both. I feel like I didn't nail this part as well as I'd like to, but it's close. So basically, this was just flicking back and forth between the reference track and this to trying to figure out the right pattern. And once I had it, it ended up like this. And then moving on, the And then the sound design, I have already had a rack with like all these different hats in here that I like, and I've set it up so there's this little selector so I can switch through them as I'm flicking back and forth between the reference and what I have going. So I can use the selector to quickly switch through, find the right sound, and then move on. And then other than that kind of standard channel strip stuff, I got rid of a ton of the lows. There's already quite a bit taken away because it's kind of sound like a very crisp and high-endy kind of hi-hat. Then we remove some of the sustain to tighten up that sound a little bit of saturation again, which saturation usually using it to fill out the sound a little bit, add a little bit of like those harmonics, and that can also make it sound full and a little kind of gritty and cool. Next up is this shaker. Let's have a look and listen to this. Let's solo it too because it looks complicated. So it's doing a similar pattern to this hi-hat, so let's add these together. And basically just what I did is I think these are mostly from larger shaker loops. So I found like shaker loops that sounded sick, but I wanted to just kind of try to get that cool little groove that's going on. So I really just wanted like one of the shaker hits so that I can like play it in. And it's kind of doing that similar like little skippy little bit kind of following along with the hi-hat. A couple different layers that are going on. And that's kind of a look at that in context. And then listen to the reference. And then moving on, having a look at any processing here, just removing some of the lows, really not doing too much. It's already quite gone in a lot of these shakers, so that's kind of all good to go. The next thing I added in was a shaker loop to kind of fill it out a bit more, which you can kind of hear in there. A bit more sparse. This is adding a bit maybe too much energy, but I thought it sounded cool. And this was also a good opportunity to start changing it up a little bit so it's not like a super duper carbon copy. In terms of any processing here, we're just removing a bit of the lows, but that's not really doing much. You can see the sample or the loop here doesn't really have much going on there anyways. A little bit of sidechain, one knob sidechain. The way I do it is I have this Ableton Shaper device with this like nice little curve. It's set to quarter notes, which is what the kick is doing, and it's just ducking a gain on an Ableton utility. That way it's doing a similar effect to sidechain, but you don't have to open up a compressor and route it to the kick each and every time. It's just one knob, you can dial it in and move on. Other than that, a little bit of Ableton saturation to fill up the sound a little bit, and I ran it into a K clip. I think it was going above 0, so I wanted to toss a clipper on top to make sure it's not going above 0 and having kind of digital clipping distortion, which can sometimes sound bad. In this case, I just wanted to control it a bit. So this was just for more, I guess, perspective. This over here was going above the 0 amount here, so I was trying to just control that with a clipper. And let's have a look at, I think there's still quite a few cool things going on. So then I felt like, I guess when I was listening to this, the hats were interesting and really driving the tune. So I decided to go with those first when building this one out. And then I got into like the claps. So let's have a look and listen to the clap. So what we got going on here is in terms of the pattern, it's on the standard like 2 and 4, like most claps and snares. Again, similar thing, I was flicking back and forth between the song. And just trying to find a bunch of different clap sounds that were similar. With claps, a good thing to usually do is have 2 different sounding claps, and you pan one a little bit to the left or a lot bit to the left, and one a bit to the right or a lot bit to the right. It creates a nice cool like stereo sound and it sounds like sick and awesome basically. Just look at that, and then in any processing here, just moving some of the lows, shelving out, and low passing a bit of the high, kind of nestle it in a little bit, and just a little bit of saturation to fill out the sound. Main thing here again is really the volumes. That's why there's not that much processing. If you find good sounds and you're playing in the correct notes and stuff like that, or really just find the right sounds and set the right levels, and you're pretty much 80% of the way there, which is kind of nice. So next up, I like to usually fill out these out with a snare, so I added this in. Probably very hard to tell, so I'll turn up the volume. And I don't know if it's really in the tune. Sounds like it's mostly claps, to be honest, but I usually like to have something like claps left and right and then a snare down the middle. It's going on the same pattern. It's kind of like two on the 2 and 4 of each bar there. And then basically just went through a bunch of different snare sounds that I had and landed on this. And then, like, I don't think there's actually, okay, there's some processing. We're moving a little bit of low, so it's making room for the kick and the bass. And that's really, really it. Next up is an interesting, fun part, which is the Congo bit. So, or Congo or bongos or whatever you want to say. So let me turn it on and have a listen to it. And let's listen to the reference. Basically what I did is I just looked up kind of like Congo, Bongo kind of tribal stuff on Splice. Found something that sounded kind of similar, and then I just chopped it up a bit and moved it into areas that were similar to the reference track to get like a similar vibe. And then some processing, removing some of the lows, shelving out some of the highs, but also low passing some of the highs just to try to like nestle it in. It was just quite like a tonal. Sounds sick, full too, to be honest, but trying to like just nestle it into the rest of the drums a little bit, in the exact same way that we're bringing up the attack, so the transients are hitting a little bit harder. The main thing is that we're using the transient shaper here to duck some of the sustain, so that it's a nice way to help it blend into the track and sound like a little bit more minimal and awesome. I'm running into a sound choice effect track, using the pan man to just do this little bit of movement, so the congos are moving a little bit, which I like to do. Something I did add in was the shifter device from Ableton. And I dropped it by 12 semitones or an octave and just blended in the dry and wet a little bit. Subtle. Adds a little bit of like thickness and body to it, I would say. But that main thing is like the volumes. Really, that's really the main thing again. Then what I like to add on usually is some kind of like a break. So I added on this loop here. Turn it up. And solo it. So usually something I like to do is build up the core sounds like this: kick, open hats, claps, snare, the core sounds using your one shots, and then layer in some kind of break or top loop, which is a nice way to add some character and complexity in a subtle way, because usually these breaks have like more like fills and little bits of character into them, and it's a nice way to blend it into the rest of your core sounds to make it sound like fuller and cooler and more, dynamic and interesting. So just found this house break on Splice. I did the little trick where you set the transients here and you change it to the right arrow and you can dial back the transients, which is another way to tighten up the sound to help it blend in with those core sounds. Other than that, removing a bunch of the lows, trying to get rid of like the kick and any of that low end information, so that our low end information is what's really important there. Like our kick is nice and loud, taking up all that low end, same with our bass. And then Transit Designer, tightening it up even more so with the sustain, a little bit of sidechain for like pumping, making room for the kick, a little bit of saturation, fill up sound a little bit, and a little bit of width here again to make things a little bit more stereo, push things left and right. And then what do we have? A couple last little bits that I added in was like in the reference. I feel like I could hear like more little bits in the high end. So I added this little vinyl bit. Solo it for a second. Looked up like vinyl hi-hat and then just used the same pattern as before. So that way just adding a little bit of like kind of crispiness in the high end, which I thought sounded kind of cool. Removed a whole bunch of the lows to make sure that it's just that high end. Removed the attack a little bit, so that way it's the other hi-hat is taking care of the main transient, and this is a little softer. A little bit of saturation to fill out the sound. And one other thing I did add in some of these over here was I added like these rides, super subtle, so I'll solo it. Same thing, kind of following that little ta-ta-ta-ta little bit of like that we originally brought in with that hi-hat. So it's another way to add in a little tiny bit of high end. Not sure how effective this stuff really is, but I added another one here. Let's have a listen. Just a ride sound. Just sounded like there was like some kind of little high-end sprinkling going on in the main track, so I wanted to try to emulate that basically. But yeah, so that's a look at the drums for this one. It was pretty fun to make, particularly coming on the Congo vibes that I really like adding in there. That said, let's jump into the 80-20 rule to do a nice recap of everything we learned here on the drums so you can apply it to your own tunes. Before we move on to that, and with that said, let's jump into the 80-20 rule for this one. Hi, my friend, Matt from Best Friends Club here. And if you've been paying attention, then you probably figured out what the 80-20 rule is when it comes to building out your drums. The goal here is to get 80% of the results with only 20% of the time, energy, or effort. And because the first key to the 80-20 rule for drums is to use a reference track, we're making sure that we're effortlessly hitting 80% of a very professional sounding track. In particular, we focus on nailing the pattern, sound selection, and the volume compared to the reference track so that we keep things fast and focused as we're building out our drums. The second key of the 80-20 rule here is to mix as you go in an extremely streamlined way by only focusing on the volume as well as a simple repeatable channel strip for each track that we're adding to our drums. The third and final key is to repurpose your old project files and to build up a suite of powerful templates, Ableton racks, and one knob effects that you've personalized and curated over time. If you'd like to get a head start by downloading all the racks, templates, and all the files that you've seen me use in the Ableton project file for this video, or if you'd just like to take a closer look at any of the techniques or tracks you saw me work on in this video at your own pace, you can find a link to this video's project files on screen now and at the second link that's in the YouTube description. I'm recreating a different song from the Beatport top charts every single week and making the project files available to anyone who wants them. You'll also get access to a private Discord where you can ask me and the community questions, as well as share tracks for feedback. If you or your music are not quite ready for a shot in the arm like that, I've also made you a completely free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that have helped me figure out how to completely finish one new song each and every single week. And you can grab that free Ultimate Song Finishing Toolkit by visiting the first link that's in the YouTube description here. However, if you just feel like staying on YouTube for now, that's totally fine. Save that link for later and check out this playlist of videos where I remake drums from other songs from the Beatport top charts. Or if you want to take what you've learned in this video to the next level, definitely check out this video right here.